Hi everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Kickstart Your Real Estate Investing. In this week's episode, we're going to take the next financial metrics which is important for you when you're trying to evaluate different real estate opportunities. This one is called return on investment. In this particular financial metrics, what you're looking at is you're looking at things from a very holistic point of view. You're looking at, if I'm going to go and purchase this particular investment, what are the different ways in which I'm going to gain value from this investment, like what money I'm going to make over a certain period of time. And then when you sell it, what are the appreciation or not happens on that property. And finally, at the end of my period of holding this particular property, what is my return on investment? The formula for this is pretty simple. What it does is it takes that what's your gain from this particular investment. It deducts what is the cost of this investment, which is the money which you put in, and then it divides that with the cost of the investment, which is again the same, the money which you have put in. So let's take a concrete example. Let's say that you bought a property worth $100,000 by paying all cash. Now, when you buy this particular property, you decide to hold it for 5 years. Every year you make a cash flow of $6,000 per year. So in 5 years, you have a cash flow of $30,000. Now, when you sell this property at the end of 5 years, it sells you for $115,000. So it appreciated in value, and after you take care of all the closing costs and everything, the gain you got from that was $115,000. So now your total gain at the end of 5 years is $115,000 when you sold the property and $30,000 in cash flow. So your total gain is $145,000. Now you take that $145,000 and then you deduct that by $100,000, which is your original investment. So it's $145,000 minus $100,000, that is $45,000. So that is the net gain from this investment. And then you divide that by $100,000, which is the initial investment cost, which is basically the money you put in for this investment. So $45,000 divided by $100,000 is 45%. So you're at the end of 5 years, your total ROI is 45%, which is basically $45,000 divided by $100,000. Now, a point to remember is 45% in 5 years does not equate to 9% per year. So it does not go serially 9%. Because of the concept of compounding, which happens when the money is taken, you make some money, interest on it, and then it compounds in the next year. So in this way, there is a separate formula where you can basically take your ROI, which is there, percentage ROI, and for how many years you're holding it, it comes back and gives you an annualized ROI for that particular year, right? So what you can do is you take that particular amount which you have, run it through the formula, and in this case, something which had a 45% ROI for 5 years is annualized to 7.71%. So that way you know that every year what is the annualized ROI on that particular investment. Okay, now let's take another example which is also pretty relevant, is when you buy a property and you take a mortgage on that. Okay, so let's run to the same example. You have a $100,000 property you're buying. This time you're making a 25% down payment, which is $25,000. So your total cost right now is $25,000. You're again holding this property for 5 years. Now, instead of getting a cash flow of $30,000, you get a total cash flow of $20,000. And the reduction is because now you have mortgage and interest to pay. Okay, so now your cash flow is $20,000. Because you're paying your mortgage over a period of 5 years, you also get a principal payback. So you're able to pay down your debt. And now let's say your particular principal is $5,000. So at the end of 5 years, you're able to get back $5,000 from the principal perspective, or as part of the entire mortgage payment you made. So you made $20,000 in cash flow, you did $5,000 in your principal payback, and the third thing which happens is because now there is an appreciation, so it cost, let's say it was bought for $100,000, and now after it, when you're trying to sell it, it sells for $115,000. Very similar to the old example, the other example which we have, right? So now you made a net gain of $15,000 after paying off all the loans and all the other things which are there. So now you add all the three. So you made $20,000 in cash flow, $5,000 in your principal payback, and $15,000 in your appreciation. So now your gain is $40,000. Your cost was $25,000, which was the down payment which you made. So the balance is $15,000, and that $15,000, then you divide that by your cost of investment, which is $25,000. So in this case, your ROI is 60%. And this is one other thing you'll observe is anytime you buy a property using a mortgage or you do a lower down payment, your ROI increases because you're able to take less money and put into it and get more out of it. So that way you're able to get a higher ROI when you actually go and buy a property through mortgage. Okay. So again, in this case also, just because your ROI is 60% for 5 years does not mean that your yearly ROI is 12%. Here also, if you analyze it, your annualized ROI will be 9.86%, which is still more than the 7.71% which we saw in the earlier example. So this way you can take all the numbers, do a projection for let's say 5 years, 10 years, 7 years, whatever your holding period is, and then compare one investment with another by looking at ROI, which takes everything right from the beginning of when you bought the property, you made money on it, your cash flows, your appreciation, your principal payback, and after everything is done, when you sell it, what is your ROI which comes out of it. Next week, we'll also take the next one, which is your internal rate of return, IRR, and go through a similar example to see how IRR differs from ROI, which we just looked at. So if this was helpful to you, please like, add some comments, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.